So let's talk about classifying stock in terms of cost. So in this case, we have ABC classification of stock. ABC is derived from the Pareto principle, which, well, the 80-20 rule, okay, which I'm probably hoping that you're familiar with. So the idea here is that you're going to classify stocks as A, B, and C. And then the difference between A, B, and C will depend on the value of the stock, okay? In short, the revenue the stock contributes, and yeah, well, that's going to, and the percentage of those stocks that you have. Basically, it's the percentage against the revenue those stocks are going to pretty much produce, or the value of the stock. So, okay, here's a simpler way to understand it. So under category A items, you have the smallest number of stock, usually about 20%, that will have a value of 80%. All right. So the point is that there's 20% of stock that gives you 80%, or that have 80% value. All right. So the smallest number of stock with the highest number of value, that becomes category A. For example, let's say you are dealing in cars. Okay. So in a car assembly business, engines will fall under category A. Okay. The car engine is obviously engine, say gearbox. You're going to have a lot of those. They're probably going to be like 20%. And yet they cost more, okay, compared to things like side mirrors and bolts, okay, and nuts. So the engines, you're going to have few of them. You're going to manage them carefully because their value is going to be very high. So those are category A items, okay, where about 20% of those items give you 80% of the revenue. And then you have category B. Now, before you look at category B, here's just a quick question, okay? What are some measures that you can put in place to ensure that you effectively manage inventory that fall under category A in the ABC classification of stock? Again, that's a question. That's a practice question. I mean, remember, there are a lot of these questions. You can just access them using the link in the video description. So let's move on to category B. The items in this category make up about 30% of your stock and contribute about 15% of your revenue. Think of it this way. Remember, 20% of the stock, the item you add under category A, contributed 80% of the revenue, right? Which means, what are you left with? 20%. Because 80 is already produced by category A, right? So it means category B and C will produce 20% combined. And you're already saying that category B is already producing 15%. And in this case, these are 30% of stock. So remember, 20 plus 30, that's 50. And then you already have 80 plus 15, which means now you're left with 5% revenue and 50% stock. Anyway, let's move on. So category B, right? 30% of these items which produce 15% revenue, right? And again, practical example. In case of the car assembly, this is where you have things like body panels, and stuff of that nature. Now, don't get it wrong, okay? These things are still valuable. They're just not as valuable as category A item. So the idea here is that you're classifying stock in terms of value, okay, and revenue that they produce. So the percentage of those stock and the revenue the stock represents for your business. And then we have category C items. So this is where you have 50% of the remaining stock, which only produces 5% of revenue. They are still important. You're just going to pay more attention to them like category A or say category B, right? So in our case, the car assembly example, what do we have? In this case, we have things like bolts, nuts, fasteners, and other things that are used to hold the car together. Right. So when it comes to ABC, of course, there's some calculations which I've just not bothered with because, again, I mean, if you want a video on that, if you want a video showing how to do the actual calculation of ABC stock, just leave a comment in the video description, or you can put it up in any of our social media platforms. So that's Facebook, Twitter, X, okay? Whatever. The point is, if you want that, just comment below, and then, if you want a video showing how to actually do the ABC calculation. But just a quick one. So ABC, right? A, what do you have here? You have items, okay, 20% of your stock that will give you 80% of revenue. And then you have B. B, you have 30% of the stock that gives you 15% of the revenue. And then you have C, where you have 50% of the remaining stock, okay, so 50% stock that gives you 5% of the remaining revenue. That way you have 100% revenue and 100% stock, A, B, C. Again, If you have any question, as always, comment, okay? Don't sit there with your question and think, okay, yeah, just type it there, okay?